I'm Realtor Deb Tomorrow, and this is At Home in Bloomington, brought to you by Karen Russell, Ruoff Home Mortgage. We profile the people, places, and resources that make Bloomington, Bloomington, and help you live your best life. At Home in Bloomington. Hello, and welcome to At Home in Bloomington. I am your host, Realtor Deb Tomorrow, here with another awesome episode. It's actually going to be our season ender, which is kind of sad. I'm joined, as usual, by the lovely Miss Karen Russell, best damn lender in the state of Indiana.
Hello.
Our sponsor, Ruoff Home Mortgage. Hello.
I should have brought, like, a bottle of champagne.
Right.
We could have opened it in, right before, or on air.
This is episode 36, so I'm pretty proud that we were able to get 36 episodes. We're going to take a little break for the summer, and then we're going to come back in the fall. We're already working on lining up guests for the fall, so I'm super excited about that coming up. But I thought we need to give people a chance to listen to all 36 episodes so that everybody's up to speed when we come back in the late summer.
Yes, absolutely. Summer vacation starting. There'll be long car rides. So.
Right? We are perfect for car rides, aren't we? Mm-hmm.
We are.
Yep. Okay, well, I had an intro written for today's show, but it was...
But you scrapped it?
It was predicated on the fact that you knew who our guests were.
I might. Now I'm going to feel bad that...
don't.
I might, though.
So I don't know how to do my intro.
I'm having a hot flash. Just do it.
Rip the Band-Aid off?
Yeah.
Okay, so we did a little Facebook follow last year sometime, where we talked about Meadowood being a great resource for the community.
Yes.
And how I have picked up several guests and learned a lot of things just by following Meadowood which is a senior living community. Yes. Just by following them on Facebook, because they've always got stuff going on.
When
we attended a session back in March.
Yes, that's who they are. Yes.
So
they're dressed more casually. Okay. This is what threw me off.
So big light bulb pops on now because our guests today are Paige Freitag and Erin Martoglio of Freitag and Martoglio, and they're attorneys.
Yes.
And they put on a session talking about some elder law issues.
Yes.
And you and I both went because we have parents that we're concerned about and wanting to understand and make sure that they're protected.
Absolutely.
And at the end of that, I was like, well, they need to come on the show because I learned so much. And you think this stuff is basic, but it's really not. Mm-hmm. And I feel like this, last week we had the financial advisor on and we were talking about resources and trying to encourage people to, get started, and that everybody should be, planning for the future and planning for the now.
Yeah.
And this is sort of
all of that in place, for sure.
This is sort of part 2 of that. So we're really going to focus today on elder law, but one of my takeaways from the session at Meadowood that we went to was that there are some things in here that really everybody need, regardless of your age. Mm-hmm. And that was a huge eye-opening and light bulb moment for me. So I will admit that my parents came to visit up from Texas about a week or so after that session, and I just went straight at them with, do you have this? Do you have that? Do you have this? Do you have that? All this documentation and things that we're going to talk about today. And my mom was like, well, I signed stuff. I don't really know what it is I signed, but I signed a bunch of stuff. And I was like, okay, well, we probably need to find that out. And then I thought, because don't tell my brother, but I'm executor of their wills. So I have, my dad had given me, I think a lot of kids get this from their parents. You get the big envelope of stuff.
Yes.
And you're like, I don't know what it is, whatever.
Yes.
So while my mom was there, I thought, I'm going to go through this envelope. I mean, it had everything you can imagine, every kind of power of attorney and every kind of directive, everything. And I was like, do you know you signed this stuff? You signed a DNR here, a do not resuscitate. Are you cool with that?
Right.
Because she didn't know. And that was eye-opening for me, too, was that they signed everything, but she had no clue. And if, God forbid, something were to happen to my father first, I don't think she would know what she could or couldn't do because she didn't really understand.
Well, because you have the envelope of papers.
I could.
And Judith doesn't. No, I'm kidding.
Right.
I'm teasing.
I don't know.
No,
she doesn't know where they are. They're in a filing cabinet somewhere.
It is overwhelming. And I think a lot of people, too, they don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because then it's almost like if we don't talk about it, nothing's going to happen. Everything will be okay.
Exactly. So I'm hoping we can talk about that today. So anyways, kick me under the table if I start to talk too much. I'm really passionate about this subject.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people in our age range, 32, are passionate about that age because we care so much about our parents and we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing and we want to continue to be, not their guardian and not their boss, but their child. Right. And some of these paperwork. Anyways, okay, don't get me started. I guess it's a good thing it's my show, so I can talk as much as I want. So anyways, welcome, Paige and Erin. Am I saying your last name correctly?
Yes.
Okay, it's a tough one. I think you just look at it and you go, oh, okay. So Freitag and Martoglio. So you handle a lot of different cases, and obviously we want to focus today on elder law and just some basic good practices for human beings in general. But can you want to talk just a little bit about your practice and kind of what kinds of law you do practice?
Sure. This is Erin. We practice primarily transactional sorts of work, and Paige is elder law. My practice is mostly business transactions, estate planning. I do estates and trusts, probate work, and with that, some real estate comes my way. Mm-hmm. And I'll let Paige talk a little more about what is elder law.
Yeah, I think that was going to come up maybe later in the interview, but I'll go ahead and address it now. Go for it. Elder law really encompasses a variety of law practice areas. It's just convenient to wrap it all up and say elder law. Clearly, it's estate planning, so wills and trusts, powers of attorney, healthcare advance directives, also real estate issues, tax issues, sometimes guardianships, which we're going to talk about a little bit more today as well. And then there are the Medicare issues, Medicaid issues, long-term care planning. There's some veterans benefits, services. So it really is just a whole lot of different legal areas. And not surprisingly, these are things that often come into play as people age.
Yeah. And I know one of the things and one of the reasons this subject resonates with me was that as we were trying to help a family member navigate things after she lost her husband, we didn't know where to turn, and we didn't have any clue what kind of support was out there. We were winging it. And, I was really relying on Google because I didn't know what else to do. And so anytime I see a resource out there that I think, oh, this would have helped me if I had thought about it or realized that even things like, can you talk just a little bit about like how you interact with Medicare or Medicaid issues? Because that one to me, like that doesn't seem like something I would go to an attorney for.
Sure. Medicare is less on my radar than Medicaid, just because everyone at some point will deal with Medicare, and usually that happens on your own. Hopefully when you have the capacity to make those types of decisions. Financial advisors are often critical in making helping make retirement decisions, and just signing up for that amazing federal benefit that we all have currently. Medicaid, on the other hand, is much more limited in its scope. That is basically a federal state hybrid program that will help pay for long-term care costs, either in a home setting or in a nursing home. And 90% of my clients consider Medicaid when there's a loved one in a nursing home setting.
Okay.
And there are all types of legal issues related to Medicaid and eligibility for that program because it is a means-tested program.
I know that in real estate, I've come into contact with it because you can't really, I think maybe you can own a primary residence, but you can't own other properties. And so there are times where we have had to sell things or had things on the market so that people could qualify for Medicaid. And that's the extent of what I know about it.
So that's actually not true.
Okay, good, because that was always my impression.
But the Medicaid rules are super complex.
Yeah.
So I'm hesitant to go down that road.
I don't want you to.
But as far as clearing up misconceptions, what I would say is that if a family has questions about Medicaid, the earlier you get information, the better. And you just need to be sure that you talk with an elder law attorney who has that Medicaid experience.
So if someone, has an older family member and they have concerns about, needing Medicaid, and it might be 10 years from now, are there things that and I'm not asking for specific things, more a yes or no question, I guess, are there things that they could be doing 5 or 10 years ahead of time to set themselves up to make it easier to transition to Medicaid if you do need that?
Of course.
I guess the question is, how far in advance should families be planning for some of these, whether it's Medicaid or whether it's a healthcare directive or whether it's a trust?
I think early on in this podcast, you mentioned how you realized in dealing with your family that every person needs to be thinking about these documents. And I'm going to let Erin talk about that a little more. It is never too early to plan.
How do we get people to?
So I don't know, Paige, is there a Medicaid planning time frame that's ideal?
Again, the rules related to that are so complex, but people need to keep in mind that Medicaid has this 5-year look back period for transferring ownership of assets to people other than a spouse.
Okay.
If a couple is worried about asset protection, I think you should be in touch with an estate planning attorney anyway. But if you have specific concerns about Medicaid, asset protection, anybody in their 50s or 60s, it's not going to hurt to just have a meeting to start these conversations.
Great.
And hopefully your financial advisor who was here last week talked about the options for long-term care insurance and trying to figure out a way to save if possible so that you could avoid Medicaid.
Right. Yeah. Because Medicaid's not certainly the most luxurious option out there. It's just more of a safety net.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we're just talking about a general time frame for when people should be thinking about having these advanced directives in place, when you are 18, you should start thinking about what is your plan. So a lot of people realize that their parents need this when there's some issue, but in reality, every adult should start thinking about these plans and having something in place to take care of these legal matters if they're incapacitated. Because the hard part is we don't know if or when
you don't plan to be, you don't plan to be, And that was, like I had mentioned earlier, that was sort of a big light bulb moment for me when I saw your presentation at Meadowood. So let's talk about that, this idea of power of attorneys. I know what that means just because we use it in real estate sometimes if someone's not available to write the paperwork. And I see people who have older parents who maybe have a power of attorney for them to be able to help transfer real estate. But this idea that everyone from the moment you turn 18 really should have a power of attorney was mind blowing to me. And I don't, maybe I'm stupid, but I was just like, what? Gosh, that really makes sense because I think what would happen to, whatever. So can you talk a little bit about kinds of power of attorneys and what people should, how people go about getting one?
Sure. So there are all kinds of powers of attorney documents. To name somebody who can act for you for a specific period of time or for a specific scope of activity. One thing in real estate that you may have seen is a limited power of attorney so that somebody can close a real estate transaction on behalf of somebody else, and it's only effective for that kind of a transaction for a limited period of time. That's one kind of power of attorney. But in estate planning context, we're talking really about a general durable power of attorney. So we don't know exactly what powers are going to be needed and when they're going to be needed. So a person will grant another trusted individual the power to act for them on a broad range of financial or health matters, if we get into that. And it could be for an indefinite period of time.
Okay. And I know one of the questions we had at the presentation was you can have a power of attorney that only becomes active when you become incapacitated. And the question everybody always asks is, well, what does that mean? What does incapacitated mean, and who deems me incapacitated?
Right.
So the default provision under Indiana law for powers of attorney is that they would be effective as soon as you sign the document. Mm-hmm. So that would mean unless you state in your power of attorney that you want some type of proof of incapacity, it's going to be effective immediately. Now, when I say that, a lot of clients are like, well, does that mean that my designated person is going to come in and take money out of my bank account? Right. And my response is they would have the authority to do that, but will they? I mean, no. Hopefully no. Right. This is somebody that you should trust. Right. But as far as incapacity, if you want to require proof of incapacity before your designated agent can act for you, normally there's language in the power of attorney that would say that is provided by proof of a doctor's statement.
Okay.
And that is just another step that would have to be taken before that person has authority to act for you. In your business, for example, I'm sure your attorneys or the title companies will review the power of attorney. And if there's proof of incapacity, then they would also want a copy of that letter.
Yes, we've been through that.
They have to check the box to make sure that the designated person has the authority to act.
Okay. Can you give me an example of a scenario of what could go wrong or what could happen if you don't have a power of attorney in place, regardless of your age, and you're in a car accident and you end up in a coma and you don't have anything in place? What could happen?
So if you do not have a person designated by power of attorney for financial matters, guardianship would likely come into play. Okay. So guardianship is a court proceeding that requires someone that maybe you want to be in this role or maybe you don't want to be in this role. They have to file a petition with the court and have a declaration of your incapacity made, and then they are appointed by the court as the guardian who is legally responsible for you and your assets, and they can then access money to pay for your needs and care and costs. If you have a valid power of attorney in place, all of that is avoided.
And when we talk about incapacity, I mean, that could be short-term or long-term, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I think that's important too. One of the things that we always think about with a family member we have who doesn't want to do any of this paperwork. I think people, like Karen said, sort of feel like they jinx things if they drop some of this paperwork. And the conversation that the other family members have is, if she somehow breaks a hip and she's out for a week or so and she can't pay her bills, we can't pay her bills either. We can't afford to pay them. And so financially, you could get in a really bad spot that's hard to come back from if house payments are being missed or damage to, I always think houses, of course, because I'm a realtor, but, say it's wintertime and the water bill or the, gas bill doesn't get paid and the water gets shut off and the pipes burst and it could be a real mess.
The spin that I like to take with clients who come in and are maybe they appear reluctant to this idea of naming someone, doing these documents really puts you in control. And if you think of it that way, I think that helps because they're deciding who they trust and who would be handling these things for them, whether it's finances or making healthcare decisions.
Do you find that, because I think oftentimes it's an adult child who is the one who's put in charge or is a power of attorney, are people reluctant because they don't want to, like I'm executor of my parents' will and I lord that over my brother and he doesn't care. But, they don't want to pick one child over the other because there's just family dynamics. And is there a solution to that or something you'd say?
Sure, that happens. And I think what we try to encourage our clients to do is to think of a child who may be best suited to handle the particular powers that you're giving them. So, and to, as much as possible, try to put this out of their mind that it's a game of favorites.
Yeah.
It's really not a popularity contest. It's just making sure that the best person with the best abilities suited to the tasks at hand is the one who's going to be making the decisions.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I think my parents is more, it was an issue, I think, of availability and, you know, that I probably had more freedom to be able to get down to where they are, which, because neither one of us live in town with them. So that, you know, becomes the issue more than, I mean, they do love me best, but that's a whole other, we're not going to go there.
I was going to say, my mom with the four of us.
Yes.
She put two of us as like the financial part of it. And then the other two for like the medical piece, which I was happy with that because I don't want to be that decision maker at that time.
So you're financial?
I'm financial.
Because you're the banker.
So Kim and I, my older sister and I are the financial people. My other sister and my brother are the medical. So
my parents did the same thing. There's 5 of us. And they split it up.
Yeah.
And we could talk a while about whether it's ideal to have multiple people named. I would just encourage folks to think hard about that.
A lot of it is at family dynamics again. And so, you know, I think you and Karen, your family are pretty much in sync with decisions. And so you're not running into, you know, button heads, but I certainly know families that would be an issue.
That's really true. And that's why these are not just simple forms that can be filled out off the internet, because there are so many complex family dynamics at play and everybody's unique. So it's really helpful to have an attorney work you through the process and figure out how it's going to work for your family.
Awesome. We have to take a break, but when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about that and sort of what information, if someone were going to sit down with an attorney, what information they should bring with them and how you kind of can help walk them through the scenarios. I'm sure you ask a lot of questions trying to understand their family dynamics so that you can give them the best suggestions possible. So we'll talk about that when we come back. Stick around. You are at home in Bloomington.
Hi, this is Karen Rastel with Ruoff Home Mortgage. Did you know that you may qualify for a renovation loan to make updates and improvements on your current house, or to purchase a fixer-upper you can turn into your dream home? Apply now for a free, no-strings-attached pre-approval to learn your options. Contact me today at 812-606-7653 to get started. Ruoff Home Mortgage is an Indiana corporation licensed by the Indiana Department of Financial Institutions. This is not an offer for extension of credit or a commitment to lend. All loans must satisfy company underwriting guidelines. Equal housing lender. NMLS number 141868.
This is your Real Estate Real List. Real advice on buying and selling real estate based on my experience closing over 800 home sales. Today's list is about the basics. What are the first 3 things you should do when you've decided you want to buy a house? While it's tempting to get on the internet date some houses, and then call the listing agent, or worse, click on the more information button that sends your info to random realtors and lenders all over, that's not the best way to get started. Here are the first 3 things you should do. Number 1, interview and pick a realtor. If you are serious about buying a home, this should be your first stop. Randomly calling listing agents to see homes means the seller's advocate is helping you. The person advocating for the seller, not you. You have the right to your own advocate working for you with your best interests in mind, so start there. Number 2, interview and pick a lender and a mortgage type. There is nothing more disappointing than falling in love with a home and then finding out that the payment is higher than you'd be comfortable with. Everything else you look at will be compared against that home and won't stack up. Getting with a lender prior to looking at homes will ensure you only look at homes you can afford. And number 3, you've got a realtor and a lender and a loan program. Now you can start looking for homes. By having established a relationship with a realtor, you signal to sellers that you are a serious buyer. By having your finances lined up, you are ready to move ahead when you find your perfect home. I know, the boring stuff first, but I promise you that if you follow these steps, it will ensure a smoother process with less frustration and disappointment. And honestly, all that boring stuff up front can be accomplished in just a couple days. So contact me and I can get you started. For more information on the basics of getting started buying a home, check out my Real Real Estate Today podcast, episode 46. You can find it on my website, YouTube channel, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast sites.
My name is John Lee. Deb Tomorrow is my realtor. She has helped my wife and I sell 2 homes and purchase another. She's a smart, outside-the-box thinker and truly cares about her clients. Deb makes the complex world of buying and selling homes seem easy, which is a testament to her knowledge and skill. Long story short, Deb should be your realtor too. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to At Home in Bloomington. I'm Realtor Deb Tomorrow. Before we get back to our guests, Erin and Paige from Freitag and Martoglio, this is our Facebook follow segment. I kind of previewed this in the beginning, but I want to mention it again because I do think it's a really cool resource, and that's Meadowood, following Meadowood on Facebook. We had a guest, probably episode 10-ish, somewhere around there with Bloomington Humanities Center. And I found them and found out what he was doing through the Meadowood Facebook page. I found this event where we met Erin and Paige through the Meadowood Facebook page. So there's there's musical events, and we've got some friends right now that are on a trip in Romania.
Yes.
With a group from Meadowood, and a friend of ours went with his mother who lives at Meadowood, but you don't have to be a resident of Meadowood to take part in a lot of their trips and a lot of their events. So, really cool, and they like to drink over there, if that's your thing. So
that's why you want.
I'm sure they love me advertising that.
That's why you want to retire. That's where you. I am
so ready to go to Meadowood. I can't even tell you.
I love it that when we were talking with Matt Doring last week on
the financial advisor,
on episode 35. Where you said my end goal is to be at Meadowood, and I was like, I applaud that.
The financial advisor is always saying, "What's your goal? What's your goal? What do you want to do?" And I had no idea for the longest time. And then I visited Meadowood. I was like, "Oh, there it is. I need to be able to afford Meadowood. I'm good." And then last night, I was visiting some friends of mine whose mother is at Meadowood too, and I said, "Well, she fell and hurt her knee, and I said, is she able to get down for dinner? Because they have a really nice restaurant for dinner." They go, "Oh, they bring her a plate. She can order," and they bring a plate. I was like, when can I move in? Seriously, you have to be 55.
That's it?
I'm ready to go. That's all I'm saying. Anyways. Okay, so follow them. All right, so let's get back to talking about someone wants to come in and start the ball rolling. What does that look like? What should they do? What should they bring? What questions should they be asking?
First of all, Erin and I are happy to meet with anyone on an informal get-to-know-you basis. You're not committing to working with us. We're not committing to working with you. And it's extremely important that you be comfortable with whatever attorney you're going to be working with. So we offer that. The one caveat is that we just can't get into the meat and potatoes of legal advice and that type of setting. But we are happy to meet with anyone just to make sure it's a good fit.
And should you go with someone? I mean, I'm thinking an older parent. What?
Well, let's have them answer that question, because I was thinking in the terms of real estate, whenever you're showing a house and people bring other people, and it's kind of like
confuses things and
muddies the waters a little bit.
Yeah.
So, but yes, go ahead.
What's your advice?
Well, identifying our client is priority number one for us. And often we have adult children come with parents, and I will always ask to meet with the parents separately.
Great. Yeah.
And hopefully the children understand that. If there's a fuss made about that, then that's obviously a big red flag for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that was part of the conversation when we've been talking with a family member. I'm like, I will take her there and sit out in the waiting room. That's fine. If she's not comfortable driving there, I'll get her settled. But she needs to feel comfortable expressing whatever and knowing that it's confidential.
The American Bar Association has a pamphlet that they publish that's called "Why Am I Sitting in the Waiting Room?"
Interesting. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. So what information should they bring with them for kind of the beginning? What kind of information should they be gathering? Because I think that's an overwhelming thing too, because they think they need to have answers to all the things they think you might ask them.
So if somebody is ready to, go ahead and start working with us, and then we have a form that we will send out prior to their first appointment. And it's really just an inventory checklist sort of thing, asking a lot about assets and family members, and giving them a chance to maybe start thinking along the lines of what we're going to need to be discussing the first time we meet. But certainly they don't need to know all of the answers, and certainly writing down all of the questions they have is a good start for our first meeting.
So people don't need to go in and say, okay, I need to have a trust set up for A, B, and C, because they don't know that. And
right. If they can more identify their issues and their questions, we can help them find the right solution and identify what tool in the estate planning kits can be really best for solving their needs.
Awesome. I saw a blog post on your website that talked about how you interact with other people in that person's village, medical providers. And can you speak a little bit to how important, because the financial advisor was saying that last week too, how important it is for them to be able to work with, other people on the team, that there's a team that's supporting the person.
Your term village is completely accurate. And the best case scenario is for all of the clients' professional advisors to be working together. And the article that we posted had to do with the intersection of the elder law attorney and medical providers. Mm-hmm. And there are just clearly lots of different ways where those people working together can be helpful, especially when we're at the point where there are potential capacity questions.
Let's talk a little bit more about the healthcare portion of it, because I know the presentation that we went to at Meadowood, that certainly there were some eye openers there for me, and I think Karen as well. And then there were some really impactful stories being told by some of the people in the audience of the presentation that really drove home some points about what kind of directives and healthcare representatives and things like that you need. So should we start with a healthcare representative and what that is?
Sure. So a healthcare representative is an individual who you would appoint to handle healthcare decisions if you are incapacitated, and that's the trigger point for that particular power under the law. So you have to be incapacitated for that person to have the power to go ahead and make those decisions, and that's done by appointing a healthcare representative and
prior to being incapacitated, obviously.
Prior to being incapacitated and designating the healthcare powers of attorney that are available in the Indiana law.
So that's a good thing to do when you're creating your power of attorney.
Yes.
Is to then also create a healthcare representative at the same time.
Right. And you should be thinking of it just as another kind of power of attorney. Mm-hmm. And it may or may not have a different person who you name, like we were speaking earlier, for that particular set of powers than who you might pick for financial. But it can certainly be the same person, and there are advantages to that too. So.
And if there is not a healthcare, here's my big thing. I'm always like, and what happens if you don't have this, right? And that was my big question going into the presentation at Meadowood. And so I was very excited that was answered. I was like, now I know. So if there's not a healthcare representative appointed, what happens if someone is incapacitated?
So the Indiana Code has a default sort of provision and a list of people, and now it's a priority of a list of people who can act and make decisions about an individual's health care if they're incapacitated.
And so one of the things I noticed when you go down that list, it starts with a legal guardian, then a spouse. If there's no spouse, it goes to an adult child. And I think I asked the question, well, what happens if there are multiple adult children? And unfortunately, that's not spelled out in the law. So that's a little bit of a free-for-all. And in some families, that can be sort of a scary proposition.
Exactly. And that just goes back to the point that if you take the time and you get these documents done and in place, there will be no questions because you are making those decisions.
And the other important thing I remember from the presentation is that you should then take some time and have a good conversation with your healthcare representative to make sure that they do understand your wishes. And that's not just for your benefit, that's for also the healthcare representative's benefit, because you see these stories of people like, I don't know what's the right decision to make.
Well, I think at the presentation, their example was, if you haven't communicated this information to that person that you've named that person as the healthcare rep, they might be shocked whenever you here's your copy, kind of keep that safe.
Yeah.
But yeah, and have that conversation so that they're not blindsided.
Right, exactly. And a healthcare representative, whatever they communicate with the medical staff, it's binding, correct? Like they have to follow that.
Yes.
So as opposed to, we learned about living wills, that's something we hear about, that's a word that we've heard and we don't really understand what it is or how to make one. But can you talk to us a little bit about how that's different and what that can be used for?
Yes. So the living will is really a communication tool for the individual and their healthcare representatives to give them an idea of what they would prefer if they were in a situation where there had to be a decision made on being kept alive artificially. What does the individual prefer? And that helps the healthcare representative know, hey, in this situation, this is what mom would have wanted.
Mm-hmm. But the living will is not binding.
The living will declaration is not required to be followed by a physician.
Or the healthcare representative, I guess. I mean, the healthcare representative could decide to do something different.
That's true. And so the ideal, and maybe this is another podcast idea for you guys, the hospital social worker group, they all have an ethics committee. So I would imagine, I don't know this for certain, but if you had a situation where someone has a living will declaration and the doctor knows about it and the healthcare representative is saying, well, despite this, I want you to go ahead and try this or that, my belief is that the physician's going to listen to the healthcare representative, but it may be that hospitals have policies on when they might bring in the ethics committee to talk to the family about that, just to make sure that.
And we were told by someone, at this presentation, a story about their mother and having a living will, as I understood it, but it not being followed, and they ended up having to get attorneys involved, and which is not certainly how you want to spend the last few weeks of a loved one's time here on Earth, and so that leads us to another subject, which is something new that I had never even heard of, and I know it's about a year old or so, and so you're on a mission to kind of help get the word out about this, what's called a post form.
Yes. So POST stands for Physician's Order for Scope of Treatment. Indiana adopted POST. It's been, I don't know, 4 years. There were some amendments made to the statute just this past legislative session, but it's still relatively new, and there is still a lot of education that needs to be done about it. This document, not everyone is eligible to have a post form. That's the first takeaway that people should have. And this document comes from your doctor, not your lawyer. It is an actual medical directive that the physician or the physician's staff is supposed to review with you or your designated healthcare representative. Either of those people can sign off on the post form. But it's for people who really are potentially facing end-of-life decision-making. And again, your doctor is the one who should determine if you are eligible to have one of these. But unlike the living will declaration, which was written completely by lawyers, this again was the language is medical language. I do want this done. I do not want this done. And it's very clear. And then the glory of this document is that it is a medical directive that follows you in any setting. So whether you're at home, whether you're in a hospital, whether you're in a nursing home. And even EMTs, if they are aware that you have the post form, have to follow what is written on it.
Yeah, so this is binding, that they have to follow it. The question is, how would the EMTs know?
Right. So there are suggestions as to where you should keep these documents if you have one. There's a suggestion that you print the post form on bright pink paper so that it's easily visible. Usually, for whatever reason, EMTs go in and look at your refrigerator.
Yep.
I don't know how that started.
Right.
I'd like to know.
They're thirsty.
But
just want to see what you got.
So yeah, having it, a magnet on the refrigerator, they are trained when they go into someone's house to look there.
Okay. So that's good to know. So the post form is something you get from your doctor. I remember you saying something like if the doctor sort of feels like end of life is something you're going to be dealing with in the next year or so, that's typically when it's appropriate to be offered up. So this isn't something that you would do along with your power of attorney or your healthcare representative, but is something that I think people need to be aware of. I think it's also important if you're listening to this episode, I have family members in other states, and this is an Indiana form, and the laws can be different. So I thought, okay, I need to know if there's a post form equivalent in Texas, so I need to do a little bit of research and understand that as well.
Correct. Yes.
What else, as we wind down here, what else do you want people to know about this really important topics that we're talking about today? Are there some suggestions you can make on how to have that conversation with a family member who maybe is digging in their heels a little bit about planning for the future?
I think that's a really, really hard question. And again, it goes back a lot to just family dynamics and where people are in their phase of life. I think that adult children need to be cognizant of the fact that a lot of times their older parents see this as giving up control. Although, as I've said a couple times now, I see these documents as giving them
retaining
more control.
Yeah.
So it's tough. There are some pretty good online resources, especially dealing with the healthcare decisions and advanced directives and how to start those conversations. I wrote down a couple before we came over. There's careconversations.org. The American Society on Aging has a good website with resources. And then there is something called the Conversation Project. And they actually have a starter kit.
Oh, wow.
So you can Google Conversation Project and check that out. And that may help adult kids learn some more effective tools on how to bring this up and talk about it with parents.
Awesome. Well, now we have to end the show so Karen and I can go Google those topics.
I looked back at Rachel and I thought, I know she's taking notes on.
We'll have all that information up on our social media information, or you can contact us. What's a good way to get a hold of you all if people want to talk more, have conversations, investigate, how to go about planning?
We have a website, bloominglaw.com, and there is an ability to start a conversation with us there through the website inquiry. Always feel free to call us up. We're happy to talk or to make an appointment to just do a meet and greet, like Paige said earlier, to make sure that we're the right fit. Email is wonderful as well. We try to be very responsive.
Awesome. And all that information is on the website. And you're located downtown. Your office is Johnson Creamery building?
We're in the Johnson's Creamery building.
Yes. So good parking, easy right out front. I don't know why I always end up talking about parking on the show, but I always talk about parking.
Well, it's something to talk about here in
It
Bloomington.
really is. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to sharing all of these resources and information, and just really want to encourage people between last week's episode and this week's episode to spend your summer doing some planning. May is actually, our timing is impeccable. We're recording this show on May 14th, and I think we're going to be promoting it in a couple of weeks, but May is National Elder Law Month, so there's some good resources out online for that as well. It's really important, and I just want to encourage everyone. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will be back with another episode of At Home in Bloomington. Got a show idea? I'd love to hear it. And be sure to contact me for all your real estate needs and questions too. You can email me at deb@realrealestatetoday.com and follow me on Facebook at Deb Tomorrow Realtor. To contact Karen Rastel for all your mortgage needs, call 812-606-7653 or log on to ruoff.com and go to the Bloomington Center. Thanks to all the Bloomington people who make production of At Home in Bloomington possible. Special thanks to superstar producer Rachel DiGregorio, digital guru Cynthia Hogan at Monster Digital Marketing for website design and hosting, and video genius Wes Lasher in the production house for engineering the show.